Hey guys, this is going to be my Ruger RXM versus Palmetto State Dagger video. So these are both Gen 3 Glock clones. They're both pretty different in my opinion, just because there's the modular component on the RXM. We're going to do safety checks on both of them, visual, physical, and visual, physical. And there's nothing in the magazine we're going to be doing today. We're going to drop the slide on both, pull the trigger in a safe direction. But they are pretty near identical in certain ways, and then they're kind of different in others. So we'll talk about it. Because they're Gen 3 Glocks, they are going to end up having a lot of the same issues that I despise. I do think that on the takedown, for instance, is one of the issues that I have with Glock. The RXM is easier to take the slide off than the Dagger is. We also have different sizes for certain things, like the trigger well is a little wider on the Glock. And then the grip angles are a little different, just a little. And the palm swell, obviously, on the Dagger ends up being kind of, I don't know, it's not something that I really need on my firearm. I'm very used to these flat side grips. And the Dagger is slightly rounded on both sides. You can see here. I've added Talon grip tape to this Dagger, but it was rounded prior to me putting the grip tape on. So what that does is it makes it so that when you grip it, this hand has to kind of cup it a little bit right there. Whereas if you have these flat grips, you can get a large amount of surface space onto that grip. Much easier than if you have a rounded side. So I like this better. It is more expensive. The MSRP on these I think is like four something. Stores typically sell it for $4.19. You can see them as cheap as $3.50 sometimes. But that is kind of where the frame differences end. Then we have trigger differences. So the Dagger has a hinged trigger. So the hinge being that you push at the bottom of the trigger hinges, and then you get your trigger pull, okay? And the RXM has a bladed safety. So it's got this little blade right here. You push, and then, oh, it's not reset. You push, and then you push to the wall, and then you got your trigger pull. I like this bladed safety more. I have experience with both the hinge and the blade. My first firearm ever had the hinge trigger. They're not great. They feel terrible because unless you are really used to being low on your trigger, you know, you can always run into that happy medium where you're too high on the trigger and then you haven't even actually depressed your trigger all the way. So it is better to be on the bottom of your trigger because you're getting more of that fulcrum point, which means you actually have less of a trigger pull. Whereas if you're up high, you actually have to pull a lot harder to get the trigger. So you have a lighter poundage if you're pulling on the bottom of your trigger than if you're pulling higher up. So I know that doesn't make sense to some people, but it's true. And it's much easier, especially on this flat bladed trigger, to be low and do that. People like having like a rounded portion on the bottom so that you can feel that your finger is lower on the trigger. A really cool thing that I've seen a lot of flat blade trigger companies make is they put little nodule at the bottom so that it's still flat, but you know you're at the bottom because you can feel that nodule. RXM sort of has that. They don't have anything that sticks out, but you can see that it is a flat bladed trigger, but it's kind of like a combo. It's a little rounded at the bottom, so you can feel that you are at the bottom. That's nice. So they both accept the same magazine, which is cool. PMag accepts back into this one, and also accepts into the Dagger, and they both drop free. and they both function. So I think that if you had either of these firearms, you would be pretty happy about them. This has definitely got the ability to be upgraded into much more of an expensive and higher tier, I would say, firearm than this, because it is modular, so you can swap out the whole bottom of the frame and actually get some really nice frames, and then everything else on here can be switched out as well. Your downside with the RXM is that your trigger is attached to your FCI, which is the fire control insert, okay? So that's going to be harder to swap out, and even when you swap it out, it's going to be harder to get what I would consider to be a significant upgrade on it. Because the trigger is part of the fire control insert, and the insert is the firearm itself, replacing the functionality of the trigger to be better is going to be harder than just swapping out the trigger on this, because the firearm itself is the frame on this. So every part of the striker and trigger on this are going to be things that you can swap out without being yelled at by the ATF. Whereas this, the trigger is attached to a bunch of stuff that if you took away, suddenly you'd be in a lot of trouble. So that's the downside. Everything else on this is going to be easier to upgrade and kind of do stuff with. They both have the same issue that Glock has, which is they have these cheap slide releases. RXMs might be a little better. They've rounded it, so you get more functionality when you're just pressing up and down. The Palmetto State Dagger is a flat piece of metal, and you can see that they've put this little bump right here so that your thumb goes up and over it onto the slide release so that you can function it, because if you didn't, you'd be constantly jabbing into the bottom of that metal. And Ruger has the same thing, but they also rounded the metal and curved it inwards, right? So that you're not snagging your thumb on the bottom of that metal. So this is a little better than this in that terms. I think their takedown pins are better. I think that their magazine release is about on par. This is a little heavier right here, but you might like that on your magazine release. I kind of like it to be heavier. I want to have like that firm push and know that my magazine is going to drop. But this functions. It's a little looser. It's a little, I think it's fine. The rails. Let's see. Yeah, they're about the same length. I would have to take this off and try putting it on, which I can do. Let's see. Check out the rails. Put this down for a second. Okay, so what do we have here? It looks like when the rails align, that everything seems to match up. This is rounded on the front, whereas this is just kind of cut. So that's a little smoother. Let's see what it looks like with the light on. They should both accept the light in the same functionality because they're both Glock cuts. Okay, so that's what it would look like with a TLR1 on it. This is the Harbor Freight Braun, but that's a one-for-one recreation almost of a TLR1. So it looks good. I think it accepts the light pretty well. It's not loose. This is going to go back on the Dagger because the Dagger is my cheap build. This is going to be a more expensive build down the line. I plan on putting an Icarus Precision on it. But I want everything on this Dagger to be like the least expensive components that you can get. And so the Harbor Freight Braun tactical light was a big selling point, because if you don't have something like that, then you're stuck with something like a Crimson Trace light for something cheap, and those don't fit in holsters, whereas this TLR1 clone fits in TLR1 holsters. So if I wanted to, I could run this in a holster and it would be just fine. Same will be true for this when this is eventually done. This is going to have a TLR7 sub on it, and I think a Romeo X. I think I'm going to go with the RMSC, sorry, cut and put a Romeo X on here. So everything here is going to be good. What do I think in total? I think that if you got either of these firearms, you'd be fine. They're not going to be as good as a Glock, obviously, in terms of reliability. I've shot this firearm a ton. I've had no malfunctions with it so far, but I've seen a lot of other daggers shot at this point, and I've seen malfunctions with them. I've seen clearing issues. I've seen magazine issues, like failures to feed. But I haven't shot this yet. I will be doing a lot more videos on the RXM. I'll be taking this to the range probably on Sunday, 2 days from recording on this. And I'll get a lot of rounds through it. We'll see if it's any good. So this is my kind of initial impression comparison video. I'll do another comparison video in terms of after having fired both of them, what I think, if there's any major differences that conflict with what I have currently said. But that's it for now, guys. If you have a comment, drop a comment. I will respond, and thanks for watching.